Amazon's newest hit show, The Peripheral, covers major topics of interest such as virtual reality, cloning, cyborg genetics, climate change, and AI. While this show is thrilling, action-packed, and well-produced, what does it reveal about our society and the reality of tech advancements? Sleepyheads, it's time we talk about the peripheral and predictive programming. Welcome back, Sleepyheads. I'm your host, H. Lee, and thanks for tuning in for another episode of Sleepy Aliens Perspective. And yes, a round of applause for the first deep dive of 2023. Things are only getting better from here, and I'm so excited to see what this year has in store for this channel. For tonight's episode, we'll be diving into the massive pool of predictive programming, so everyone get your life vests because things will get deep. Amazon's newest hit show, The Peripheral, premiered October 1st, 2022. The show is based off the book The Peripheral, written by William Gibson, and is produced by Scott Smith. Scott Smith is known for his work on shows like Skins, The Magicians, and Moonshine. The Peripheral stars Chloe Grace Moretz, Jack Rayner, and Gary Carr. The plot line of the show takes off when siblings Flynn and Burton, who are played by Chloe and Jack, are paid to test out an unreleased next-level VR system that establishes neural and sensory connections, making it so everything experienced while in VR can have physical, psychological, and spiritual impacts on a person in real life. While this is a fiction television show, it would be foolish to not acknowledge the premise of this show to be the ultimate goal of VR. While I enjoy this show and have only a few constructive critiques, I cannot ignore the persisting themes occurring throughout the show. Many don't want to acknowledge the reality of predictive programming, and many want to lop it into the conspiracy pool. However, it's important to critically analyze the media we consume. It's 2023, and we must be conscious viewers to protect our subconscious minds. It is our addictions to entertainment that makes us vulnerable. It puts us in a subdued state, a state that by medical standards puts us into an alpha brainwave state. This is the same state of mind that makes your subconscious susceptible to suggestions, essentially new beliefs, new ideas, and new ways of thinking. In fact, if I were a hypnotist, I would need you to be in an alpha brainwave state in order to hypnotize you. Whether it's music, movies, TV shows, books, podcasts, sports, games, or the news, our media sources, the very ones we rely on for information, entertainment, escape, and relaxation, they all have the power to negatively influence us. Media can affect our morals, values, dreams, politics, the economy, style, diet, personalities, crime, language, our physical, psychological, and spiritual health. The very nature of predictive programming is to alter one's perception and neural schemas so that we will be conditioned, influenced, and desensitized to future events, social issues, and cultural occurrences. What cannot be denied is the power of media. That is why analyses like this are necessary. So rather than add fuel to the fire, let us discuss, prepare, and evolve. The most disturbing aspect of predictive programming is the future event predicting that many mainstream TV shows and movies do. The Simpsons is notorious for predictive programming. In a 1996 episode titled The City of New York versus Homer Simpson, the tragedy of 9/11 is foreshadowed on a newspaper ad. In the episode Bart to the Future, Trump becoming president was predicted. That episode aired in the year 2000. In the 2009 movie The Knowing, featuring Nicolas Cage, an oil rig explodes in the Gulf of Mexico. In April of 2010, in real life, an oil rig exploded in the Gulf of Mexico. Perhaps the most disturbing predictive programming example is Comedy Central's show Legends of Chamberlain Heights, predicting Kobe Bryant's death. In the episode titled End of Days, Kobe is seen crawling out of a crashed helicopter while holding his trophies before dying. This episode premiered in November of 2016, 4 years before Kobe died. Predictive programming can be subtle. For example, in the 1960 episode of The Twilight Zone titled Eye of the Beholder, what is depicted is the reasoning, rise, and obsession with plastic surgery. The episode shows a society where people undergo plastic surgery at the age of 19 to become beautiful and conform to society. Fast forward to 2023, and we have BBLs, buccal fat removal, nose, suctions, ab work, breast augmentations, leg lengthening. The variety of plastic surgery out there is only becoming more vast and more obsessive. So yeah, we don't need to do any other discussion there to prove that there has been some predictive programming that was depicted in that show. Movies like The Avengers and Iron Man are seen as fun action-adventure films with great effects. But in reality, governments and militaries all over the world have been developing Iron Man-inspired suits and weapons, all behind closed doors. To be even more discreet, cultural predictive programming occurs with themes like drug use, casual sex, thruples, teen sexualization, food crazes, style, consumerism, lingo, and personalities become neurally programmed. You are being shown what is cool, acceptable, important, and status boosting. In a spiritual sense, there's nothing wrong with being influenced by others in the massive web of energy that is collective consciousness. Yet, if media is the greatest weapon thwarting spiritual and social evolutions, what does that say? Now, for my first topic I want to discuss, I thought I'd keep it light, so let's talk about fungus. So why are we talking about fungi? Did you know the bananas are going extinct? Have you read about this? Have you heard about this? And did you know that it's already happened before? So in episode 2 of The Peripheral, which is titled Empathy Bonus, Corbell Pickett, who is played by Lewis Hartham, has an impromptu meeting while visiting a VR brothel nightclub. And yes, I said a VR brothel nightclub. And I don't want to get too sidetracked, but I mean, I already thought strip clubs were weird because people pay for that kind of stuff. And most brothels, unless you're in the red light district, are operating on an illegal nature. So that's just already wrong, and I'm not okay with it. So I just think the whole idea of VR brothels is really weird. But again, this is going to be a part of our near future. And to counter argument my own self, maybe VR brothel nightclubs will make sex work a safer business. Who knows? But again, I don't want to give away too much about the show. But during this impromptu meeting with this stranger, Corbell is told that bananas will go extinct so that he will believe this stranger is from the future. So technically, one of the most widely produced banana breeds did go extinct in 1965. After that, the Cavendish banana took over the market and the Gros Michel was no more. So why are fungi and bananas an important predictive programming topic to cover? Like I said, bananas are going extinct. For the past several years, farmers and scientists all over the world have been combating lethal fungi that have been destroying bananas and plantations in South America, Asia, and Africa. There are currently 5 major fungi that cause banana disease. The first is Fusarium oxysporum, which is also known as Panama disease. There's Sigatoka, Moco disease, cigar tip rot, and bunchy top disease. Just looking at those pictures, you can see how gnarly they get, and you can only imagine how rapidly they infect whole subsections of plantations and entire plantations in some examples as well. Now, the buildup of the fungi is caused by high rainfall, and over the past several years, Asia, Africa, and South America have seen record numbers of rainfall. When it comes to South America, a lot of that rainfall is blamed on conditions in the Pacific caused by La Niña. But we also know that pollution and climate change are contributors to that as well. On April 3rd of 2022, Brazil had record rainfall of over 800 millimeters of rain, which is insane. Also in April of 2022, South Africa flooding killed 306 people. Massive flooding in South Asia occurred during July of 2022 and killed over 600 people. So for my next topic, I want to discuss how we are being socially groomed for virtual reality. Now, the Peripheral may not be created for that purpose, but it's being used to help condition the masses for virtual reality. So society post 2020 is still trying to break out of the home life culture, and this makes us very vulnerable to virtual reality conditioning and normalization. Between 2019 and 2021, Census.gov reported the amount of people working from home tripled to 5.7% to 17.9%, which equates to 27.6 million people. If you consider the fact that advances in gaming and tech like Siri, Alexa, Safe Home, social media features that alter voice and face, society is being primed for virtual reality and platforms like the Metaverse. Corporations and governments, in order to normalize and introduce something to society, they have to present it to the public in a way that says this will be good to help society, to advance society. So I don't know if you guys have seen those Metaverse commercials where they're promoting how the Metaverse can help your homework life. It can help advance education. It can create efficiencies in science, health, and medicine. It won't be long before the Metaverse commercials are saying it's a social outlet and it's a builder for when the next outbreak hits and people can't leave their homes. This is a predictive programming topic because that collective grooming that's happening for us to all be on board with virtual reality, it's really targeting those vulnerable populations of people that are like Flynn, Burton, and Connor, who is played by Eli Gorey, who feel uninspired and dissatisfied with their lives. They're working their 9-to-5s, they have their trauma, there's a lack of romance and adventure in their lives, and they just want that general escape. So those factors are the emotional triggers that are used to lure people in to virtual reality and to normalize why tech like VR could be a good thing. Because who doesn't want to escape their 9-to-5 and trauma and, the lackluster elements of their daily lives, right? So soon we'll be seeing ads that say, don't leave your home to socialize, be in nature, dine out with friends, or go dancing. Just put on your VR headset and meet up with your friends in the VR. Predictive programming is in full effect, and billionaires like Mark Zuckerberg need you to conform. Time travel by means of quantum tunneling is a concept that's introduced in episode 2 of the Peripheral. Now, by definition, because quantum tunneling is a real scientific phenomenon, quantum tunneling occurs when particles pass through a barrier that by standards of physics should be impossible to pass through. So in theory, quantum tunneling is a means of science to break the barriers of space and time. So while time travel is presented in the Peripheral through the means of quantum tunneling, I couldn't find any corporations or labs that openly admit to time travel research or experimentation. The closest that I could come to was CERN and their particle accelerator and their search to retrieve the God particle that upholds the universe. In order to capture that particle, though, they would have to open up a channel in space and time. And by such, aren't they opening up a portal? Aren't they tampering with the very fabrics of space and time? There's already been so many reports of more Mandela effect experiences, and thanks to TikTok, we can actually track those a bit better now.
So a couple days ago, CERN turned their machine back on, and people on social media were in an uproar that, oh my God, we're gonna have all these crazy Mandela effects. I was skeptical. I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I was also like, at this point, I don't know what to believe. There's so much fake news, but y'all not about to do this to me. Y'all are not about to make me think that Chick-fil-A was always spelled with a CK. This is not right. I could have sworn it was CHIK or CHIC, but there was no CK. I've driven cross country with my husband. We've been to like so many different states, and you see the cow on the billboard, and there was no CK. And it's something so small, but it's like, why are they messing with us? What is I feel crazy. I feel crazy. This is crazy.
Do you believe in the Mandela effect? Well, watch this. We all know Looney Tunes were spelt like this and not this. Apparently this didn't exist. And we all remember the monocle the Monopoly guy wore. Well, apparently he doesn't, and he never did. Now this I definitely remember, having black at the end of his tail. Apparently he never didn't. What? Who remembers the line, Luke, I am your father? Apparently he didn't say that. He says, no, I am your father. No, he fucking didn't. He said Luke. Now this one blew my mind. Apparently he had a silver leg. I always remembered him all flipping gold. Furious George apparently never had a tail, but I remember him with a tail, so what's going on? Now this one has got to be a joke. Apparently there was never one of them baskets behind it. It was always like this, and I know that's bullshit because I watched a stream once, he got sponsored by these, and I remember people commenting saying, what the hell is that behind it? Let me know if you want me to do more.
Idea that if labs are getting that close to being able to manipulate particles in space and to capture matter from space, it really makes you think, where are they at with means of time travel, manipulating things in reality, or even the multiverse? Some scientists hypothesize that the beginning of the universe was caused by a quantum tunneling event. But here's my theory, and this is all speculation with this topic, but I do think that we are getting to a point in time where either all governments have been able to time travel and we just don't know about it, or there's just multiple governments out there competing in the same way that they competed to get to space, to be the first on the moon, to successfully develop a program for mind control, to have their satellites that orbit the sun. You know, all of these countries have been competing to be the first at something, but I think also they have secretly been competing to be successful with time travel. And I think CERN, in addition to them trying to receive their God particle, I think they also seek to accomplish some means of time travel and multiverse manipulation. And while again, this may not be the exact agenda of the Peripheral, whether it be just for the entertainment means on TV or just the book version, I do think it does elicit that programming to normalize time travel, and the idea of that being achieved through means of virtual reality again gets people more excited and on board with what's possible with this virtual reality technology and what can be achieved. So yes, again, I think it's just a matter of time before labs like CERN openly admit to advances and successes in not only their particle accelerator and capturing matter from space, but also quantum tunneling and time travel. So I think we all should just be a little prepared for advances that alter our reality as we know it, because I mean, that's what all of this manipulation of energy and matter and time and space, those are the consequences. And we'll just have to see how things play out. So even though this isn't technically time travel, in the Peripheral, Flynn uses this device, this VR headset, that allows her to live in old memories from her childhood, when things were less fractured in her family and she didn't have the loss of her father. And so I really thought about this because even though it's not time travel, I thought, wow, this is like an emotional time travel, a way to go back into the past and to live in the past. And I had another thought about this because, you know, it kind of throws off basically the forward momentum that you need in order to be a human that lives a progressive life. Like, you can't just live in the past and hold on and live into old memories and live in old memories. And I know a lot of people are like, well, we have photos and photo albums and home videos that do a lot of that. But I think when it comes to virtual reality, having a hand in enhancing your memories and bringing them to life in this VR set so that you can remember the way it felt as a child when you had all of your family and people didn't die and all this stuff. I really thought, okay, so this is how people emotionally time travel. But this is also how spiritually people don't progress if they don't really move forward from the past. And if they're holding on to these old memories where they attach all of their happiness and wholeness to, you know, I think if this does actually become a thing, and this is why I'm bringing it up, because I feel like this will definitely become a thing. And I thought that was fascinating when I saw it in the show. But there's so many people that struggle with grief and loss and letting go and moving forward. And I think if this kind of technology gets introduced, that it's going to enhance that issue in a lot of people. And so it's just something else that I wanted to bring up, because spiritually, you know, you have to accept loss, you have to let go to progress spiritually, because if you are spiritually aware, you understand that there's no such thing as death. And you also understand that, you know, life is not linear, and the best thing you can do is, you know, let go and move forward and find happiness in new experiences and new people. And that's how energy evolves. But if you're holding on to the past and old memories, then you're not really evolving in a spiritual sense. But I think headsets like that let you live in old memories and old experiences, you know, I can see how they could be good for someone who has memory loss or Alzheimer's or just any sort of neural disease that's degrading their ability to process and to recognize and to remember. I could see how it would be beneficial in that sense. But if it's being used for like everyday, you know, grief and people not wanting to let go, I mean, just think about it. I'm like, why is taxidermy a thing? Because people don't know how to let stuff go and let stuff die. You know, we got to bring it back to life, even though it's not really alive, you know? And if you think about time travel, people want to go back to the past to correct things. People want to go to the future because they hope that it's going to be better than the past. So it really does put a lot of those themes into perspective. And I think it's just something that we'll have to be mindful of when it comes to the future and to the way that VR technology will diversify and continue to be incorporated and used in everyday life. But that was just a thought, a side note, letting it go, moving on. Thank you. So in the Peripheral, when Flynn first meets up with Wilf, who is played by Gary Carr, and Lev, who is played by JJ Feld, Flynn learns that JJ clones animals that have gone extinct. Now, on side note, I believe Flynn's character is a mixed breed of an AI and a clone, which I really do think is important for our future understanding of how all of that stuff is going to be working. Now, cloning dates back to 1885. Carl Imenez conducted the first gene cloning of mice by splitting mice embryos and putting them in wombs of adult female mice. In 1996, the first sheep was reproductively cloned, and this famous sheep is known as Dolly the sheep. And every time I see that photo of Dolly, I get really creeped out, because it's like she knows that she came into existence in a totally different way, and she's very she's got this whole attitude, a whole smugness about it. But I think that's very obvious. I just had to mention that. So reproductive cloning happens when a somatic cell, which is any cell in the body that isn't sperm, egg, germ, or stem, are taken from an animal that they wish to copy the DNA from. That cell is then transferred to a donor egg that has had its own DNA removed. So if you think about how governments, corporations need to get the public to accept new technology or new means of order within society, it has to be presented as a way that upholds society's standards, saves lives, and advances the world in some way. Now, and I believe there has been a soft conditioning to cloning in the same way that we've had this soft conditioning to more life happening in virtual reality. And with the cloning, it started with just general animal cloning. Now, and at first, you really only heard about animal cloning happening with thoroughbred horses and that costing a ton of money. But, there's people out there who just believe in like their lucky horse, and they just were like, no, I need this one to be cloned. So they'll pay like anywhere from like $500,000 to like $1 million to get these horses cloned. But fast forward to 2023, and there's companies like Synogene who openly clones beloved pets. So this company clones cats, dogs, or horses. And if you go on Synogene's website, you'll see that they also have client testimonies and pictures of all the animals they cloned, and the list is long. So now you have that soft conditioning of, oh, it's normal to clone your beloved pet because you loved that pet so much. And now we have the Peripheral introducing the idea of cloning animals that have gone extinct to preserve that animal in reality. So as of right now, whales, sea turtles, chimps, African and Asian elephants, polar bears, jaguars, and black rhinos are listed as either vulnerable, endangered, or critically endangered. And a lot of that is, of course, due to climate change and deforestation. But again, if you think about how governments and corporations have to get people on board, the next level to that soft conditioning that's leading up to human cloning would be to clone these vulnerable, beloved animals that are on the brink of extinction. Because yes, I mean, I still haven't gotten to see any whales. I love sea turtles. Chimps are awesome, kind of terrifying when people domesticate them, but they're awesome. Also, have not gotten to meet an elephant in person. And who doesn't feel sad for the polar bears these days? And I hate that people hunt jaguars just for their fur. I mean, it's ridiculous. And same for black rhinos and their tusk. So yeah, even me, it plucks my heartstrings, and I could kind of think, well, yeah, I'm okay if they start cloning these endangered animals. And you know what the next level of that's going to be after they clone all these normative animals that have gone extinct? We have these Jurassic Park dinosaur lovers who are going to want to start cloning dinosaurs and bringing them back into human existence. So again, I think when it comes to virtual reality, to time travel, to the cloning of animals leading up to the normalization of cloning of people, there has to be a slow build-up to slowly get people on board. And I think the Peripheral highlights how this build-up may look in the future. And the next level from just cloning your beloved pet will be to clone, these wildlife species that everyone is so fascinated by and loves learning about and seeing in documentaries and getting to see in zoos or different safari trips, because I don't know where you're looking at these animals. I don't know. But from there, it'll then be shown that, like, wow, look how, cloning our beloved pets and cloning these endangered animals has helped normalize and stabilize some things within our reality. What's the harm in testing out cloning people? And of course, I think that future is going to be very socially divided, of course, but I'm saying that it's definitely going to be a possibility because, it would be naive to assume that there isn't any sort of underground or above ground lab out there that isn't working on human cloning and perfecting that. Because we've seen it in movies for years, from the movie Multiplicity, and then we have TV shows like Black Mirror, who show us the complete horrific side of what it could look like to get a clone of someone you love who's passed away, and how it'll never truly be the same as a natural existence from a natural birth, But I think this topic is important because we can't ignore the fact that there could already be massive advances with this. I remember several years ago, I saw a Frontline episode, and this cloning researcher basically talked about how, yes, he's cloned like horses and like people's pets, but he's also been approached by really wealthy people to clone humans. So there's already a desire out there. And if you think about the way that cloning was presented in that movie, Multiplicity, it was to help this man be able to be a better father, a better husband, a better employee, so he could do all the things he didn't normally have time to do in a day. But if you can activate your clone now and have your clone get dinner ready, get lunches packed for the kids, write a paper, that's how I think cloning will be normalized in the future. It'll be presented as like, here's all these tasks that you can't complete in a day, and here's the clone that cost, $500,000 or $1 million, and now you can have this clone help you complete all these tasks in a day. And if you think it's only going to be for the wealthy, you're wrong, because they're going to have these lifetime payment plans for, lower income people or middle class people, because this is going to be the best investment of your life if you have another clone of yourself that can help you make your life easier. And no one will ever have to be alone again. So this is just kind of where my mind went, but I do think that there's some predictive programming to be found within this topic. And on a side note, I had another thought. So in terms of hunters, poachers, and whalers, I would not be opposed to VR hunting, because imagine this. So if you kill an animal in VR and you're hunting, let's say to like combat the issue of illegal poaching and hunting for sport, you would get a 3D graphing of whatever animal you were able to kill in the VR. And maybe that would be a solution to lessen the obscenity of sport hunting and poaching, because people who, do that, or who want elephant and rhino tusk, for money, or animal skins, on top of like the money that people are making illegally, it's also a way for them to prove themselves that they've conquered and have power. And it's become like a status of wealth to, have a huge animal skin hanging in your living room or your walkway or wherever they put their animal skins and such. But I do think that this topic is important, and I hope I've opened up your mind a little bit more to the reality and the possible advances to what cloning is going to look like in real life, mainstream, every day walking down the street. Yeah. For my next topic, I want to discuss the reality of VR espionage and crime. So for the first episode, the Peripheral shows us what VR espionage and crime can look like. And at first, I will admit, I just thought, oh, what a great way to move the plot line forward. But then when I looked into it, I said, oh my gosh, this is going to be the future. And of course, we already know about cybercrime and governments investing more into protecting countries and data with having, more forces that focus on cybersecurity. So in 2015, former CIA Director John Brennan announced the CIA was expanding their cyber espionage capabilities, and that cyberspace and cybercrime was becoming a top focus for national security. In 2016, Russian cyber espionage group hacked the World Anti-Doping Agency to get a hold of athlete data and medical info, and that was for the Rio 2016 Games. In 2018, a Chinese espionage group stole the intellectual property of various U.S. businesses. So those are just from, quite a few years ago, but it's showing you that there's definitely a buildup when it happened. There's definitely a buildup with cybercrime and cybersecurity and how much of a priority that it's become. So it really made me think about what crime and espionage is going to look like in the VR. And lo and behold, after doing a little research, I found different legal sites that are already preparing for what virtual reality crime can look like and what issues we'll be facing from that. So this really blew my mind. So I'm just going to go over a few of the different kind of crimes that these legal sites were discussing, and how they're basically already preparing for how that's going to look in court and how they can help protect people from that. So the first one is money laundering. So criminals can exchange illegal money for in-game currency. And when virtual reality, like social spaces and virtual reality living becomes more popular, it's going to be much easier for that to happen as well. So another aspect is terrorism. So terrorist groups use VR to plan, strategize, simulate, and also train for terrorist attacks. And it's also how they gain recruitment, because we already knew that that was happening in video games, because you can now play with all these players online from all over the world. So all these terrorist groups have to do is find that vulnerable somebody that's playing, this multiplayer shooting game, and it looks like they might be prime pickings, and it's an easy way to influence and manipulate a person into being involved in such things. The next topic is intellectual property. So let's say we have virtual reality content creators. In the same way that you saw how The Sims, people started being able to develop their own designs and clothes and houses that were beyond just what you can find in the regular Sims item section for, whether it be clothing, houses, or whatever it was, So we're going to see that happen in the VR too, where people are producing their own original content in which others may violate fair use laws, which are tricky already in reality, but they're going to be even more tricky when it comes to virtual reality. So that's a whole new level of content and artistry crime that we're going to see. Another topic is PEDOs disguising themselves in child avatars and engaging in criminal acts or exchanging illegal content that way. And it's also going to be a whole new hunting ground for them. And if you thought it was hard to monitor your child's activity online, just imagine what it's going to be like when you have all these kids out there using virtual reality and they all have their headsets. So that's just something else to look out for. The next level, something I didn't even think about, is cyber stalking. So imagine that you have, you have privacy invasion and harassment, but you also have people who want to get information about what you do in your secret life online in virtual reality. And so in order to do that, they're going to find your avatar and they'll stalk you, collect information, and maybe they'll have a way to blackmail you. Who knows? Another topic is prostitution. So VR can be used to arrange encounters in the real world, but also they can be simulated as well. And if we think about the sort of haptic development that is happening with even like exoskeleton suits, but also what we see in the Peripheral, and they're showing us how the VR set has these neural and sensory haptics that help you actually feel things while you're in the VR. I think virtual reality prostitution is going to be on a whole new level, and I do think that's going to be something that we'll see in the future as well. But again, we already have these legal sites that are working on stuff, so it's fascinating. Next, we have sexual offenses that can occur. And I didn't really think about this one, but again, something like that could happen in the VR. And here's the question that many legal offices are wondering: if that can occur and cause someone psychological damage in the same way that it would in the real world, how do we prosecute these crimes, and how do we help these people? And how do we gain purview over these issues occurring in virtual reality? So that was a huge one that I didn't think about, but totally it makes sense. The next topic is extortion. So let's say you have a government official who goes into VR after a long day of work, and while he's in the VR, he goes and pays for VR prostitution or VR sex work. Excuse me, I forgot it's 2023, but whatever. Anyways, so this government official is going to this brothel place in VR, and we have someone who has been, stalking them in the VR, and now they have proof that this government official uses VR to pay for sex in the VR. And now in real life, they have been sending this government official letters and photos showing that they know what they do while they're in the VR, and they're going to expose it if they don't do this and that. So I hadn't thought about that, but that's totally something that can play out and could totally be a part of what, our legal offices and justice systems have to incorporate into their already overwhelmed and not that efficient system. So I think that'll be really interesting to see. The last thing that I want to touch on is identity theft. So, you could have a person pretending to be a celebrity and using that person's identity to get certain favors or steal or defame or to blackmail or to harass. So that's just a whole new level. But VR crime and espionage is absolutely something that legal offices are already preparing for, and it's going to be something in our future, and it's something to think about as you engage in VR and what you do in VR, because I think a lot of people are going to see the virtual reality like Vegas. What happens in the VR stays in the VR, but maybe that's not always the case, and maybe it can impact you in your real life world. We'll just have to see. Saving the best for last, I am ready to talk about the reality of cyborg genetics and cyborg soldiers and robocops, because yes, this is a part of our future. And I will admit, when I first saw it in the Peripheral, I thought, oh my gosh, this looks so badass, because there's a scene, I can't remember what episode it's in, I think it's maybe episode 2 or 3, where Burton, Flynn's brother, who is also a war vet, you see him and his other friends who are also vets protecting their house and Flynn and their mom from these people from the future. There I am giving away too much about the show. But anyways, there's this big scene where Byrne and his friends all have these artificial sensory, motor, vision, and neural combat enhancers implanted in their body. And basically they activate it to have better combat abilities. And when I saw it in the scene, I really did think it was badass. I also thought it was sexy, even though I'm really not into guys in the military, but I do like outdoor guys, and I like a sense of ruggedness. And anyways, it was kind of hot and it turned me on. But then I thought back to my brain and, not with my what. And I thought, wow, the military and the entertainment media do a great job at showing the flair of weapons, droids, and we're ultimately being conditioned to disregard the Department of Defense's budget, which in 2022, they had a budget of $778 billion. And can you imagine, side note, the amount of problems that would solve if that were put towards hunger and homelessness and education? I mean, so many things would be resolved in a matter of months, and yet we just put it all into military, combat, war, whatnot. And I get it, it's important in many ways, but I also think that there could be a whole trickle down if that money went to the people who were able to better their lives, and in turn they're able to better society. And maybe we wouldn't need such extreme budgets like $778 billion, right? That's just a side note thought. I'm letting it go. Anyways, back to these cyborg soldiers and robocops. So before I get into the what, let's discuss the why, because there's a way that we are ultimately being led to having these introduced to society and having cyborg soldiers and droids and robocops be important to how we operate. So in 2019, The Guardian reported that the military admitted to a declining interest in military careers amongst youth. And of course, if you think about it, everybody wants to be in entertainment, everybody wants to be an influencer, nobody wants to be told what to do, they want to start their own small business, yada yada yada. I can see how they're having some trouble with getting the youth involved. But this issue led to the Pentagon spending $1.6 billion on recruitment strategies. So one way the military promotes people to enlist is the fact that they do student loan repayment, and also they have sign-on bonuses. And in 2019, they were able to increase the range of those sign-on bonuses if new recruits were willing to enter basic training after the first 30 days. Now, another side note, because I just can't help but just insert my opinion in this situation, if the military could do more for vets and PTSD and to clean up their sex crime culture that they just continue to bury, disregard, and allow offenders to continue to serve in the military, if they also cleaned up their homophobia and their racism, I think that would be a better way to get people more on board with the possibility of having a career in military. Wouldn't you think that would be better? And maybe women like Lavina Johnson, who was assaulted, tortured, burned, and murdered by her fellow soldiers for giving a group of young men a direct command and them wanting to assert their power. But this story was not only buried, but it was covered up, and even to this day, Lavina's family have not received justice or any accountability, or nor do they have any culprits who have committed this crime against their daughter. And if you want to learn more about the full story of Lavina Johnson, visit the YouTube channel Dreading. They do an awesome breakdown of the case. But it's really heartbreaking, and it's another example of why people may not be wanting to have a career in military, especially a woman. But another reasoning for the Department of Defense to argue for cyborg soldiers on top of having lower enlistment is that, well, here's another option to save human lives. Because if we do have more people enlisting and we do make them into these cyborg soldiers, well, then we're going to have less casualties and less innocent people dying, and we'll be able to save your life and give you more longevity within your military career. So that's just another argument there. So now that we know the why, let's discuss the what, how, and when. So by 2050, the military believes that cyborg genetic enhancements will be available to soldiers. So by 2050, it'll be an option for soldiers to receive these neural, sensory, vision, and motor haptics that we saw Bert and his friends using in this show that's just a TV show, but it's not a show because it's giving us some predictive programming, right? We'll be able to see that in real life. And these enhancements include visual, auditory, muscle rejuvenation so that soldiers don't get tired, neural enhancements for memory, thinking, and telepathy so soldiers can communicate. And that's also something that we saw in the Peripheral. And there's also been in development these exoskeleton suits that can enhance motor, visual functioning for soldiers. So there's currently several companies making these exoskeleton suits. And just to name a few major companies, there's Lockheed Martin, and they are known for making major military weapons and getting paid a lot of money from the government for it. There's also Rewalk Robotics and Exobionics. And again, those are just a few of the companies out there, but there are several. And our own government, the US government, has been working with scientists and engineers to develop these exoskeleton suits. And so you have all these companies competing for contracts and competing to make advances so they get picked up by the military and make $50 billion. Because what? They got that $778 billion kind of budget. So on top of the exoskeleton military suits, they have also been developing real life, state-of-the-art Iron Man-like suits for soldiers. So like I briefly mentioned earlier, these Iron Man suits and what we see in the Avengers and these superhero shows, they are reflecting a lot of what has been in development behind closed doors by governments. So in 2022, Russia announced the developments with their Iron Man suit for soldiers. The suit can now stop small arms and powered exoskeleton suits. So like I was saying earlier, these exoskeleton suits enhance motor function. So you can jump higher, you can lift more, you can punch harder, and we've seen this kind of stuff play out in our action adventure films over the past several years. So these things are slowly but surely becoming a part of. So I wanted to make another side note about Burton and his war vet friends. So I grew up in West Virginia, and I've completely seen how the military preys on low-income youth from rural areas. And even though I grew up in Charleston, West Virginia, which is the biggest city in that state, and I didn't really see much of rural life, I had plenty of friends that I went to school with who ended up joining the military right after high school because they start recruitment there. Of course, the ROTC programs are a little bit bigger there, but it kind of struck a heartstring of mine because in this show, if you see Burton and his friends, they're all fairly young still, but they have a massive deal of trauma. And then they also don't understand civilian life anymore. And you kind of see them living a blah existence. But once they get to tap back into their military skills and what they're good at and what they've been trained for and highly conditioned, if you think about the general nature of entering such a institution and a job. I'm not saying that the military brainwashes you, but they do have to condition you to be the ideal operative, highly valuable, and also cooperative soldier. So it was kind of hard to watch, but I do think that's important too, because I think more people, from those areas are less susceptible to it now. And even though some of them might be desperate enough to accept those sign-on bonuses, I think it really does show a huge problem, and that's the military preying on country people, the rural youth who have no other option in their lives to get out of their situation but to join the military. And I just had to add that in as a side note because it's important to touch on. So another thought that I had when it came to the exoskeleton suits was all of the youth out there who play these military combat games where they're starting to understand different military tactics and weapons and what a war scene could look like. And I know things have evolved from like Call of Duty, and now there's Fortnite, and I don't really know everything you can do on Fortnite, but I know it's become such a huge game. And essentially in that game, I know that you can get like these cyborg enhancements to your character to help you with combat and gameplay. But I also thought about, okay, so if the military is having this decline in their enrollment amongst youth, what better way to prime them for the introduction of exoskeleton suits that will be normalized in the military at one point? And also the Iron Man suits that will eventually become a normal thing in the military. And you have this population of individuals who grew up having an interest in these fighting games and these combat games, and they've gotten to see some of those Tekken games, and suddenly maybe it's not a bad idea to want to join the military and get to live that out in real life, especially if it's your favorite game ever. So I just had that thought, but I was like, it seems like it's, a slow trickle conditioning that they're getting fulfilled through these video games. And when they introduce those suits and the Iron Man stuff, it's going to be way easier for them to boost enrollment. So that was just a bigger thought that I had about that. And another note about those exoskeleton suits is that initially they were designed to help people with disabilities and to also help vets who had lost bodily functions and mobility, after returning home from war. But here's the ulterior motive, because there's always some sort of ulterior motive, and the next will be, hey, let's just get these for all of our soldiers. And then we got these super soldiers on the field who can not only, handle more, but, be more efficient in combat and last longer. And it's almost like, in the way you have to just kind of be honest with yourself and remember that the military will look at a soldier as, physical property, and they can enhance that physical property to get more out of it. And it's an investment for them. And I think it's just another way that's going to evolve in the future. But another thought I had is, what do you think will happen once cyborg soldiers are introduced to the military? Eventually, it will be incorporated into law enforcement and everyday life. So I recently rewatched RoboCop, and I'm so glad I did. And I can't think of his name. I feel bad. But anyways, the guy who plays it, he's super hot. And I really like him in the show Hannah. And he was on that show The Missing. So I just like following his work and looking at him. I knew the movie wasn't going to be that great, but then as I was doing this story, it just kind of all came together. But in the movie, you see the way that cyborg soldiers and droid soldiers are introduced to the public. It starts out in wartime, and then they want to introduce it on the home-based territory and incorporate it into everyday law enforcement. And I think this is going to be the ultimate goal when it comes to cyborg soldiers and that becoming cyborg cops and droid policing on the home front. And I'm sure you're wondering, why would this actually be a thing? So if you think about the Black Lives Matter protests, the strain of 2020, where you saw more police officers resigning or going into retirement, I mean, it's actually still a problem right now, and there's an actual national cop shortage. So yeah, like I said, there's more cops up for retirement or they're resigning. And because of the increased policing regulations, we've seen more cops leave. And then there's the defunding and just the general burnout that I think a lot of public service workers or frontline workers experienced during that period of 2020. But in 2022, New York City lost over 1,500 cops from resigning or just general retirement. Also that year, the LAPD reported being short 300 officers. And, you know, another thing that I thought about, I was like, okay, so these are essential workers that are protecting, you know, the human race in our country. And how much are they making? So the average police officer makes between $56,000 to $66,000 a year. Now, if I were maybe working in low-level marketing or maybe doing some cybersecurity stuff, or I don't know, working as a medical assistant, just things like that. That's the kind of salary that I think matches, 56 to 66,000 a year. But I don't think that's the kind of salary that I would say is worth risking my life for. And I think that's another huge reason. If you think about the burnout they experience, the amount of hours. And I had one of my customers at the grocery store. Her son is a police officer in Portland, and they are now being forced to deal with a lot more mental health issues because of the rising amount of houselessness and the amount of addicts on the street right now. And so instead of actually, spending their day saving people from, theft or domestic violence situations, they are now dealing with, getting this houseless person, from throwing their piss or from stealing, from these stores or just vandalizing. That's what they're having to spend more time doing. And that's just not also shouldn't be a part of their job description. But again, it doesn't quite match that pay that they're making if they're already working these long hours, spending time away from their family, not getting to engage in as much self-care. That 56 to 66,000, if I'm a cop, maybe with a little former military background, I can make more in the private sector doing security. And that's something that I'm going to look into instead of risking my life for people who want to spit on me and, having to deal with all these protests and all this stuff. So that's just something that I've thought about. But if you think about all those issues, that's the next step to normalizing and introducing cyborg cops and robo-cops and just general droid policing. So overall, I want to say that when it comes to the cyborg police officers, cyborg military people, I can see why it would be a benefit. But like with most things with technology advances in our society, a lot of it comes as a detriment, as there are unforeseen consequences that alter the way we operate, and they take away that sense of humanity, the advancements of technology. We lose touch with nature. We lose touch on how to actually communicate and socialize with people. And now we're going to lose touch with our physical nature, our natural physical nature. Virtual reality could be positive. I mean, as of right now, virtual reality is being used to help with addiction recovery and also to rehabilitate prisoners and help them integrate back into society, and also to help them with some of their behavioral patterns, their negative behavioral patterns. And if you want to get spiritual about it, maybe if someone's playing virtual reality, seeing their character play out on a screen can help them visualize things for themselves playing out in real life, which could help them accelerate personal growth. But at the same time, it could also go the opposite way, where they're doing all this stuff in VR, but they're not able to do that in their real life, make friends, date, get a job, try new things, try new foods, travel. And so that's when I believe the identity distortion comes into play. And that's what I think is the most dangerous thing about virtual reality. Because if you already consider the amount of physical and psychological identity distortion, and even body dysmorphia that social media causes, and a lot of our other outlets today that have been advanced through technology, there's so many people that I know where I'll want to share my Instagram page for my writing or for this YouTube channel, and they say, oh, sorry, I don't have social media. It makes me feel bad about myself. And so the ability for social media to trigger that, think about how that could be if someone gets into virtual reality and they find that their virtual reality life is so much better than their actual life. And that's something that we actually see happen in the Peripheral. And again, I probably have already given away too much about this show, but I really thought that was an important theme, and I'm glad that show touched on that, because that's the lore of this is what your life could be and this is what your life is, and that distortion too could cause a lot of psychological turmoil and therefore enhancing any spiritual turmoil that may be happening. But that distortion with reality and virtual reality extends to spirituality. And as of right now, and I think more people are connecting with their higher consciousness and developing more spiritual awareness, more universal awareness to everything that's happening cosmically around us, and really how expansive and how big this universe is. But still, a majority is not on that wavelength. So if you think about the progress we're making now, virtual reality could completely distort that, because if someone else is already struggling to evolve in their real life, but they find it easier to have this outlet and evolve this virtual character of themselves, how far removed are they from their spiritual growth? And yes, this is where my mind goes, but I think it's so important to think about. But overall, I really do think a lot of the topics that I touch on warrant some public discussion and more research as well, because if we're already seeing these advancements, we already have like grocery stores that don't require any customer or any workers. There's a McDonald's where you can just order everything electronically. There's more restaurants out there that are using AI. It's slowly all coming into motion, and it's better if we have an understanding of these things now to minimize the possible negative impacts and consequences of our technological advances. And again, I know a lot of what I talked about may seem like speculation, but this is how you have to think. And if you're not thinking critically about these things, then you're just buying into the system completely and you're not thinking for yourself. And that's why, again, analyses like this are important. But overall, I really did enjoy this show, The Peripheral. The ending surprised me. I'm not going to say anything about it, but I thought it was interesting. And at this point when I watch TV shows, because writers are just doing too much a lot of the time, I am mainly watching just to see what the fuck is going to happen. So that's my mindset with this show, and even with most shows. I think I just like a month ago I watched House of Dragon finally, and as soon as they did the age jump or the time jump, I was like, the fuck? It totally threw me off because I was so attached to the younger versions of some of the characters, and then they just jump in time, and I did not like that. But at the same time, I still watched it because I was curious to see how things were going to play out. And at this point, that's the writer in me, that's the reader in me. I am just curious to see how this story ends, and I'm sure that gets a lot of other people. But again, I think the show is worthy of your binge and your time. And sleepyheads, be sure to let me know in the comments which topic you found to be most fascinating. What are your thoughts on some of the tech advancements that I discussed? What do you know about some of the topics that I didn't touch on? Do you have any personal experience with these things? I would love to get a discussion going, an actual discussion that surpasses any marketing or robot comments. So please bless me with some actual commentary. Let's get into it. But overall, sleepyheads, I really enjoyed this deep dive, and I hope you did too. And I leave you with this simple note: mind your programming and mind your tech. Sleepyheads, I hope you have a good night, and I'll see you again soon.